Hey, you guys, welcome back. This is Richard Sachs, your host on Lost Arts Radio, and this is our program called Lost Arts Radio Live. And it's not attempting to be a summary of all the news because we don't have time to do that in 1 hour a week, you may have noticed. But we have been recommending that show that's been almost totally banned everywhere because they're real news, and that's not allowed anymore in our modern society, I guess. But we're amazingly still on the air with this one, partly because I try to be careful about keywords that, especially with smaller shows like this, they don't have enough humans to monitor all of us in real time yet, although I'm sure they would like to, or at least robots, but they do have AI monitoring keywords all the time, and we haven't tripped that yet. So when I recommend that other news show that was banned off of the major social media platforms, I can just tell you, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that the first syllable of its name is short for information, and the second syllable refers to conflicts, like, you have what they call wars between different countries and things like that. And you put those together, you can figure out, if you don't already know, what that news show is. And I know there are a lot of people who probably are really upset with me for supporting it, but they're not understanding the value of it, and it's not a partisan show. It's not any racist thing or any nonsense like that. It's just accurate, real news and showing things like they are, which I think is incredibly valuable. And apparently the global rulers agree with us that it is, because they've been trying to not only ban them off the internet, but now they're showing their collusion with other major global corporations. For example, PayPal, which just notified that news show that they would, after 18 years, they actually couldn't work with them anymore, and they were firing them off PayPal, and they're now on other payment processors for selling the material they sell on, the products that they sell on the show, which are really good. And so the power structure is attacking attacking their other payment processors. And it's coming out in the open now more and more, the collusion between all of the major global corporations, which have really become almost indistinguishable from governments at this point. And the major social media giants are bigger than most governments too. But even aside from that, most governments have become corporations or networks of corporations. It's really a very strange kind of a science fiction movie that we're living in right now. It's called The Real World, I guess, but it's very strange. And getting through it successfully is more and more of a challenge. But most of the real serious problems facing humanity that we look at on this show and other ones are all engineered by a very small cartel of rulers at the top levels of power. And then they, down through what's called a pyramid-shaped power structure, they give different motivations to the different levels of people below them. But anyway, it's a very small group. It's incredibly coordinated, way more deeply and widespread than most of the conspiracy believers would ever believe. It's really quite amazing. And just to keep things not seeming too extreme to new listeners or anything, I won't mention the fact that above the top human level are non-human, non-physical entities that are controlling them. We won't say anything about that, so you don't think it's too strange, even though it is true. But just at the top level, it's these really small numbers. So they have a problem. How do you control and direct billions of different individual, you'd call them people, actually, non-physical entities wearing these costumes of physical bodies, if you're awake to that? And they're, in what they really are, what you really are, is these beautiful, unlimited, formless beings made out of pure spirit, not even light or thought or mind or anything, but ultimately what those come from. How do you, as a group of criminals who want to control and destroy a planet, how do you keep them from figuring out what's going on and get them to destroy themselves, each other, and all life on Earth? That's the essence of what the global rulers at the highest levels and their bosses above them that I told you I won't mention, that's what they're concerned with. And we're trying to boil things down in this show because it's so short, but keep it accurate. And as far as I can tell from quite a long time of investigation into this stuff, that's what they're concerned with. So in order to do that, to make those incredible beings feel like they're not what they really are, you have to make them absolutely believe that they're limited, helpless, not very intelligent, totally dependent, temporary, worthless, hopelessly trapped. They have no future. In other words, you have to get them to paralyze themselves. That's the essence of all the programs. Okay, whether you're looking at toxic agriculture or geoengineering or GMOs or fake, toxic medicine, where you get the medicine that gradually kills the person. So it's a wonderful business model. And you also get everybody addicted to multiple medical drugs, some of which are really dangerous to even try getting off of, like antidepressant drugs, stuff like that. You can't just drop a lot of these things, or you could have really serious effects. I don't use the word side effects because that's a made-up term. It doesn't mean anything except it's a major effect, and it's called a side effect so that you won't think it's important for some reason. It's just another little hypnotic use of language that is to control you. It doesn't really have the meaning that it's supposed to have. So that's the system that we're living under now. And the guys at the top are really admirably organized and dedicated to their work. I mean, I traced it back thousands of years, the same program basically under different names. And it's intergenerational. They keep it going from one generation to the next. Very concerned about breeding and who marries who and how they keep total devotion to that. The motivation that they use to control the people that are serving them, because remember, just a handful of people at the top really can't personally oversee everything. So just like a person organizing a huge network of corporations, they have to organize the network of control systems that keeps us engaged in suicidal behaviors and beliefs, because that's the main essence of what leads to our destruction. Not stuff that they do by themselves, but what they convince us to do to ourselves. So they've got layers of control. For example, the upper level servants of this dark energy, they'll believe that if they help reduce the population, that means you and me and all of us, to, like the Georgia Guidestones and other places refer to, that it's going to come down to like 500 million people in the world, that they're going to be among the privileged elite who then have the world as their playground and a few humans as their servants, and hopefully a lot of robots so that they don't even need those. And it's going to be really great. And if they help with that, getting to that point, they'll also be extremely well compensated. I mean, you can't believe that all the chemtrail pilots are just doing it on their off time for fun. They're doing it because they get a lot out of it. Yeah, they have these little things to worry about, like, well, we are hurting everybody on the world and we're helping to kill people, including our own families. Those are kind of psychological issues that they have to deal with, but they can brush those aside with enough alcohol and parties and prestige and support from the power structure and saying, here's your special membership card and your secret passwords and everything, and we're going to give you the antidotes to all the poison that you're spreading around the world, things like that. And they can kind of go along with it because they get a lot of support. So those people are given that motivation. Below that, they're still in government and corporate positions of power. There's a motivation of money and power and personal prestige and recognition among the so-called elites and things like that. If you go lower down than that, all of this is beautifully organized. It's really amazing. many of the people in the power structure who are doing things like enforcing mandatory or injections. I don't want to say too many key words in this because I'd like to stay here with you for a while if we can. But by the way, a good time to remember, if we get kicked off any or all of these major platforms when I mess up and start saying keywords, or we get some human people having time to watch these small shows, then look for us at real.video, because our friend Mike, and his last name, separated from the Mike, is Adams, and that's another key phrase that is forbidden. And he started this really great new platform called real.video, where you don't get censored. I mean, if you're advocating killing everybody and stupid stuff like that, or communist, fascist, tyrannical nonsense, then you probably won't get approved for a site there. But if you're just like a normal good person, go to real.video, get yourself a site if you want. You can start posting things that would get censored more and more on the large social media platforms. It's really good. It's a substitute for the main ones that are in existence now. A lot of the people working at those levels, and even the lower below them levels of servants of the system, think that they're actually doing good. They don't have to, like the chemtrail pilots and people like that, they don't have to block out part of their mind and just try to be unaware of it, get drunk if it gets too problematic or anything. A lot of these people at the lower levels think they're actually doing good, and they're saving lives. And for example, if you force everybody to be injected with poisonous chemicals that are supposed to, this is really stupid, you guys, but people believe that this makes you immune to diseases. And I'll give you a little hint, it never did. Even before they did the adjuvants and started putting toxic metals and material from aborted babies and incredible material in there, food preservatives, all kinds of stuff, that formaldehyde that should never be in your body, at least while you're living in it. The people who are helping enforce that everybody has to have this, that babies less than 1 day old have to be injected with a really hideous mixture, I think they call it hepatitis B, and have all this horrible stuff put in their eyes and get an injection of supposedly a vitamin shot, but nobody asks, well, what else is in that vitamin shot? You're not supposed to ever ask questions like that. So if you're ever going crazy and you don't know it, and you're thinking of having one of these injections giving to your children or yourself, or the drugs, the toxic chemicals that they call medicine, because you're not supposed to know anything better to do, ask them for the complete copy of the package, what they call it, the package insert. Because if you get a package, for example, with a whole bunch of syringes in it, or not syringes, but vials that you're supposed to stick the syringe and suck the stuff out and inject it into somebody, those packages come with a detailed description of what's in, the ingredients of what's in what's going to be injected into you, which most doctors don't even know. It's just totally amazing. And not only that, it comes with a list of what could happen to you if you were dumb enough to have this injected into you, or trusting enough, let me say it that way. Read that, I suggest, before eating any toxic chemical thinking that it's medicine, or before having yourself or your kid get toxic chemicals in liquid form injected into them or you. Just do this little thing about read and study the package insert and the effects, which they deceptively call side effects. That doesn't mean anything. They're just effects. They usually include death right on the paper, because the companies that make these things don't want to be accused of fraud. Even if they're immune from everything else, they don't want to be accused of fraud. So they have to tell you right on the package insert that it could kill you, or it could kill your child. It's not good. And that way they've honestly told you what could happen to you, and what does happen to a certain number of people who fall for this stuff. Anyway, I'm just telling you that people at that level, even the ones who work for the child kidnapping rings, the government child kidnapping rings, that if you are not going to inject this junk into your child, or if you refuse to give your child chemotherapy, which is going to kill them, then they figure, well, for your own good and the good of your children, we have to come kidnap them. Sorry, but it's for all of our good. Those people, most of them who are in the enforcement departments of these crimes, they generally think that they're actually serving humanity, helping the country, saving us from plagues, saving the kids from parents who are so terrible that they wouldn't want to poison the kids. This is part of the weird environment. And all I'm saying is we're going through the motivational levels of these different levels of people that serve the system. And at that level, they generally think that they are really helping humanity. It's amazing, but they really do, just because they're not very conscious. They will be someday, but they're not right now. And the goal of the top power structure that is organizing all this stuff, and I always give these shows like it could be the last one that you hear. So I want to give you as much of a complete package as possible. The goal of the top world rulers is not just reduction of the number of people on the planet, unless you consider reduction to zero as reduction, which I guess it is. And not just humans, but all life forms on the planet. That's their goal. And if you really understand that, which is emotionally very difficult for most people, and they think, oh, that can't be crazy, that can't be true, it's a crazy conspiracy theory. No, as far as I can tell, honestly, it's true. And then people would ask, well, why would they want to do that? Like with the chemtrail spraying, don't they know they're killing themselves too? Yeah, they know it. They're not stupid in the IQ sense of the word. They're kind of stupid in the sense that there are deeper laws of nature that they think they're above, such as the fact that if you intentionally try to damage everybody, it's going to come back to you. That's not some evil God, really mad at you and saying, all right, you did this, now I'm going to do that to you. It's not even required to do that. It's your own consciousness that guarantees that will come back to you. And that's the same with chemtrail pilots or anybody like that. They don't know about that. But other than that, they're very intelligent. And they intend to destroy everybody, including themselves, as part of, probably lose 1 million people if we had 1 million watching this, but it's a ritual sacrifice. It's not for money. At the top levels, it's not money at all. It's more religious. You can call it satanic, but the label does not matter at all. It's worshiping pain and destruction and darkness and despair and any kind of suffering for its own sake, in order to please a dark God that is the point of the whole thing. And that's what's going on. If you understand that one thing and you see some crazy program that's going on in the world, chances are you will now understand it. It allows you to connect the dots. So it's for total global destruction, but we're actually fortunate that it is religious in nature, because as a ceremonial sacrifice, they got to go through the right steps. They have to give notices to you of what they're doing, not for any law of your country or anything, but what they consider a higher spiritual law. They have to meet certain milestones, and they have to give certain notices, and that buys us time. And we're in that time right now. That's why it's so important what we do with it, because this is like the grace period, where they can't just jump into the final destruction phase without doing these things exactly according to directions. So this explains the toxic agriculture. It's not just that people are too dumb to figure out that spraying poison on your food is not intelligent. It doesn't feed the world. It poisons you and your food and everything in the soil and all the animals and birds and honeybees and everything else. It's not intelligent unless the goal of the people who are arranging it at the top is to destroy the biosphere. And that is the goal. So it is intelligent. But it's just different, than we're trained to think that science is really working hard to help us and all this stuff. That's not exactly what's going on. But if you understand the motive at the top, you understand toxic agriculture, medicine where they want to cure cancer by giving you something that causes cancer, you think, how could they be that stupid? Well, the doctors who are administering this stuff are very well compensated, but they're also threatened that if they don't do it, because words are used against them, they call this the standard of care. Care sounds really great, right? Everybody likes care. Well, the standard of care, that means this really good care, is to poison the patient, even if the poison kills the patient, which it usually does after a while. So it's like psychological programming, like to be in a cult. And when you go to medical school or PhD school, there's a reason those people have the hardest time to understand common sense in general. There are some brilliant exceptions, and they make great heroic doctors and scientists and educators and everything, but the vast majority just memorize all this stuff in so-called higher education, and then they repeat it, like injecting stuff into that one-day-old baby is safe and effective. And they hear that phrase 100,000 times maybe in medical school. And so they think they learned it. Memorization is not the same as learning. And they kind of miss that point, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff they memorized, and they mix it together with true information, like the locations of every little anatomical part in the body. And those things are, for the most part, true. So they think the whole thing must be true. So the safe and effective thing must be true too. They're not looking at it subtly. They're just trying to get through the program under intense peer pressure, sleep deprivation, strong support from like drug companies on the outside saying, look, when you graduate, we're going to give you some really good stuff. And so the psychological programming is don't question what you're learning. Absorb it, move through it, get ready to do it to people for the good of society, and everything's going to be great. This same thing explains the dirty energy technology. You know, we haven't needed oil-based energy generation or, transportation, vehicles running on refined petroleum or anything for more than 100 years. And in fact, it was demonstrated recently. I don't know if it was in the 90s or later, but this guy drove, I think it was a dune buggy, all over the U.S. on a few gallons of water, nothing else. And he had a low energy input designed for separating the oxygen and hydrogen in the water. And hydrogen is more explosive than gasoline, so you don't want to carry around a big tank of that. But he had a system that just dripped it into the engine, and you don't need any fuel that way. So the government really thought that was great, and they agreed. So they poisoned him, and he died, and they killed everybody that got a hold of his papers later on. So that's the real energy policy of the U.S., and I don't think the current president is aware how deep this problem goes. But if you understand the people at the top, you understand the dirty energy technology, the food processing to make sure it's absolutely dead before you eat it. Because, by the way, if you're interested in nutrients, the primary nutrient is life force, and it's not even recognized by science yet. So that's food processing, toxic body products, fake education, where the kids aren't even being taught real history anymore, and they're being totally confused on how to really do math, or they learn fake science, just like I was just mentioning, and we're hearing fake news on the television all the time. By the way, it's a really good idea to get rid of your television instantly if you possibly can. And if you want to take guidance from the top tech giant presidents and everything, they don't let their kids play with things that are involving screen time. They radically restrict cell phone use and stuff like that. And the reason they do that is because they know they designed it as a weaponized technology to take over your mind and your consciousness, and they don't want their own kids being harmed by it. It also explains the programmed entertainment, where the heroes are all the fastest killers. And even the women now, the women heroes are generally the ones who can kill everybody the fastest. And this has been going on for thousands of years, actually, but it's really being pressed now. And, the insanity is spreading, especially in America and what used to be Europe and the UK and a lot of the so-called Western world. The insanity is really spreading out into the street in a way that hasn't been seen for a while. And I've been saying this is not a very good thing to have happen. So some of the people have written to me and say, why are you bashing the poor liberals and progressive people and criticizing them and saying they're so bad and everything? I'm not really bashing anybody, okay? Because I'm not against anybody. I see everybody as these beautiful spiritual beings that are subject to mind programming and various kinds of subtle attack by the power structure. But underneath all of it is the same incredible being. It includes you and me and everybody. Just overwhelming beauty. And what's so weird, and probably make you think I'm definitely crazy, is that even the worst people doing the worst of the bad deeds and running the child trafficking, which is all over the world and is used heavily for blackmailing people who are allowed to get into political power or corporate power, and running satanic rituals where they torture and kill children, which is going on every day all over the world. Even those people, that's what can happen to you if you get programmed heavily enough. They're the same incredible being that we are, but totally buried under miles of programming. And so I'm not against anybody. I'm not against them. I'm only against the activities that are being done. And so when I was being mistaken for bashing progressives and stuff, I wasn't doing that. I'm just saying, you go out in the street and start screaming and violently protesting, and you don't even understand what you're protesting against, calling everybody a racist and a fascist and stuff when you don't even know what that means. I'm suggesting that's not a very good behavior to keep doing. And there are better things to do with your time and energy. If you really want to help the world, you don't do it by just going insane like that. And a lot of those guys are being well paid by very dark influences coming through the Soros companies and other ones that we don't even have names for. But I'm not against anybody, even the weirdest perpetrators. I'm just really against them continuing doing what we're doing. And I have been looking for a long time, decades, for solutions for this stuff, not just to continue the perpetual fight, which is the way it is here for tens of thousands of years on this planet anyway. But I want something that stops the cycle. Because whether somebody's alive in this age or 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years in the future or whatever, I look into what it's like for them to be going through all this agonizing suffering. People sitting around the bedsides of cancer patients and they don't know what caused the cancer or that you can cure it by natural means. They don't even know that. And I don't really like that suffering. It's us in another form. It's not like, well, that's somebody else, so who cares? If you understand the intimate connection between everybody, you care about everybody. And the people who are in the most trouble are the ones who are doing the crimes, because they're setting up really unpleasant futures for themselves according to certain natural laws. So I'm not against anybody, but this screaming crazy behavior out in the streets, these people doing this stuff, attacking women and kids with bike locks and now with long staffs and weapons of different kinds, saying that they're being liberal or progressive, they're really crazy and they need to stop doing that. And the good, well-motivating groups like what are called the Proud Boys and other ones like that people call conservative, or the news might want to call alt-right or fascist or whatever, those guys are actually trying to protect some of the innocent victims of these crazy screaming violent protesters. And I support that, but I think we need a more permanent solution that's not just going out and attacking the criminals. We need something to go beyond the whole paradigm. So this violent behavior now, the doxing, and which I didn't even know what doxing was until recently. It's exposing somebody's private contact information so that they can be attacked and harassed. It's really a nasty thing to do, and that's being pushed in the so-called left or Democrat or socialist elements of the political spectrum, and mob behavior is being really promoted. And then they go on TV and say, oh, that's not mob behavior. That just this week they were on CNN saying how ridiculous. Those are just peaceful, really kind, loving protesters. And then the real news stations show these screaming mobs running down the street when they confirm the Supreme Court justice. They go there and they start screaming and smashing on the doors of the court. And I mean, these are not nice, friendly little people. These are angry mobs, and they're saying, oh, it's not an angry mob. And these are the same insane people that are saying, leave the border unguarded so that anybody, drug dealers or terrorists or anybody, can just come across and they don't even get questioned. Or like under the previous U.S. president, they just get money and they get paid with free bus fare anywhere in the country to set up whatever they're going to set up, and they get to put on welfare and everything without even identification. And it's completely suicidal. It's like going to sleep at night and taking the front door of your house off the hinges, especially if you live in a city where there are all kinds of different people who would appreciate that very much. And these same screaming people are supporting abortion as one of the things that you're supposed to support if you're on that side of the aisle, which is, we're not on any side of the aisle. We're supposed to be human beings. And if you're a woman and you're carrying an unborn baby, you're carrying an unborn baby. It's not a fingernail. And now, I've been saying that for many, many years, but now it's really hard to deny because they've got the higher resolution sonograms and stuff. And some of the abortion people have quit because they watched, and this little tiny baby was trying to fight off the weapon that was going to murder it. That's not a fingernail. It's not part of the mother's body. It's not a normal, it's a choice, but it's not a moral choice. And it's another person that you happen to be responsible for. It's like if you're carrying a born baby in your arms and you throw it on the sidewalk and you say, well, that was just part of my body. That's not true. It has nothing to do with political parties or whether you're left or right or anything like that. It has to do with having some semblance of consciousness. And it's not, the consciousness is the issue here. That same upper level control grid that wants to spread insanity is the source of all the gender confusion. California, for example, which is leading the way, is trying to get it so that on the birth certificates of your new baby, they're not going to say what sex it is, even though it's obvious. Biologically, people are born one sex or the other. It's in every one of their cells. The DNA is different. But they're saying, according to this insane way of thinking, that if a boy is born and you put boy on the birth certificate, you're assigning a gender arbitrarily. You're being a Nazi, right? So they're going to stop doing that. They're trying to get everybody totally insane, so they have no common sense. And there's a real major campaign for that every day. You'll see it on the subtle programming on the mainstream news. They're trying to get everybody totally fearful of everything. This is a common way to understand what you see going on around you. In my experience, fear has no benefit. It's like injecting poison into your body to become immune from disease. It doesn't work. Fear doesn't work either. It makes a mess. And if you think it makes you faster or stronger in an emergency situation, it doesn't. It makes you less coherent and makes you make mistakes. And as I've said before, the top athletes in track or martial artists, they don't go into the contest afraid. They're highly ramped up, but they're focused and calm. And that's what makes them so unbeatable. Same applies to you. The crazy people are supporting injections, and that's not just on the left side of the spectrum. A lot of the conservative people on the Republican side are Sorry for the phone noise in the background. It'll go away in a second. A lot of the so-called conservative people are also supporting injections, forced injections, and they consider that cutting edge science, which is completely ridiculous, And the people who are supporting that say the science is settled, but real science is absolutely not only not settled, it can't ever be settled. Because if it's settled, it becomes a religion that you're just supposed to believe injecting this stuff is good because it's good. And if you question it, you're bad, and you have to be excommunicated from the religion, lose your medical license or whatever, or be kicked out of your pediatrician's practice for your child. Real science can't be settled at all. And that's where you see that these advanced educational programs that people go through are often cult training. And if you develop common sense in your life, you're way ahead of the advanced person with the advanced degree if they don't have the common sense. And it's the same mentality that's promoting war on both sides, Democrat and Republican, and all over the world. The crazy people are the ones who support aggressive, preemptive war. Like in the last presidential election in the U.S., the current president who is in office is the only one of all the ones who are running who was against war. And that's why he's hated by the media and the whole power structure are one of the reasons. And racism is being supported every day across the country and the world in the media. Now it's racism mostly against people with light skin. It used to be against people with dark skin. Racism is even to think badly about or good or even think well of anybody because of their so-called race. The reason I say so-called is that race, we probably all originated in Southern Africa, migrated to places that changed the skin color over time. And to think that the other skin color is bad or good is totally ridiculous. Thinking that everybody with dark skin is good or bad, or the same thing with light skin, is really not intelligent, not even a little bit. But the people who are promoting this kind of stuff, the socialism and communism and tyranny under any name, government control, now all the censorship that's really ramping up, they're not even bad people at the very base of it. They're buried under miles of programming. And the only way that we can cut through that and help them, because there's lots and lots of them, is for us to develop that in ourselves. And that's a whole long subject in itself. Anyway, they're all totally hypnotized, mind controlled, but they can wake up. And right at the moment, the people calling themselves conservative or constitutional or identifying as Christian or generally trying to care about other people are not as hateful or vicious, and they're willing to talk to people on the opposite point of view without starting screaming or smashing on something to stop them talking. But a lot of the people who are calling themselves conservative have huge blind spots. A lot of them are in the environmental issues. Even the current president of the U.S., I don't think he has any real understanding that he's bringing in companies into the U.S. for the sake of the economy, which is great. But many of them are toxic companies whose products kill people and help to destroy the world, which is not a great way to do it. I'm sure there's a way for us to make lots of money for everybody, but doing it in a way that actually helps people and doesn't poison them or otherwise destroy the environment. One of the things that's going to have to be done for any kind of prosperity program in the U.S. or anywhere else to actually work is to absolutely get rid of the so-called central bank. In the United States, it's called federal, but it's not federal. It's above the law, outside the government, private, not subject to investigation. I think the current president is getting an idea of that. A lot of the so-called conservative people also have a huge blind spot in recognizing Agenda 21 in all its forms. The current president called for development of the Internet of Things. That's a horrible program that is meant to implement Agenda 21. and more surveillance, total surveillance with a transceiving uh, program chip in every item on the planet, which is, a big business model, but not good for freedom at all. And a lot of the conservative people also don't realize what's wrong with civil asset forfeiture, which means you can steal everything that somebody has with them because it might have been involved in a crime. And they have to prove it wasn't to get their stuff back, which is almost impossible. Also, both sides of the aisle are apparently totally oblivious to geoengineering, which is an assault against all life on the planet, not just humans. And how that is happening, I guess it's partly from the mind programming that anybody who talks about geoengineering must be a crazy person. And the people who want to get elected or even look good in their position in bureaucracy don't want to look like a crazy person, so they don't talk about geoengineering. But it's urgent to look at that and get it stopped. So all the details of all this stuff, these are just illustrations, come down for the power structure. Their challenge and their goal is to maintain hypnosis as long as it takes them to finish destruction in the ritual sacrifice. That, in a nutshell, is the whole thing that they're doing. They're trying to keep you unconscious long enough to finish you off and everybody else. Really, that's pretty accurate. So you know what you have to do to make a contribution to having that not happen, right? But how's it all going right now? Well, in the U.S., there is massive growing support for the current president and disgust with his opponents because of this real incredible circus that just happened with the other side trying to stop the confirmation of a Supreme Court justice that the president needs for backup of the things that he needs to do if he's going to have any chance to really clean out the totally entrenched swamp, which is running the U.S. government for the most part right now. And the corporate media in the U.S. and the U.K. and most of Europe has pretty much gone into total blatant lying on a level that hasn't been seen in recent history, and I mean for hundreds of years that I know of. It just completely lying for whatever public perception they think they want to create. And this week there was a big thing in the U.S. watched by the whole world centered around this entertainer named Kanye West, who happens to have dark skin. So, he's one of those people who would be considered of that particular race. I don't believe in race at all, as I told you, but most of the world does. So he's considered as the dark skin race. And he was very popular, and he's one of the few people, like popular stars in Hollywood or anywhere, that will tell the truth, and they don't care if they get smeared by the media or by the rulers in Hollywood, which is now mostly in the hands of the Chinese government, actually, in the U.S. But he said, well, I don't care, I'm going to tell the truth. And he said good things about the current president, who's done a lot of great stuff, trying to protect the borders, calling out religious terrorism, being a great unifying person, even though the media will edit his speeches to make him look like a racist. He's totally not racist. He's bought up private clubs that have been excluding minorities just so that he could let the minorities in. I mean, same with women. He's the opposite of a racist misogynist. And the media, nobody can imagine that the media would lie that much. But Kanye West was brave, and he came out and told the truth, met in person with the president, which he could do because Kanye West is super successful, high up, very successful financially, and had access to that. And they met, and what they talked about was how to help, and that was this week, how to help minorities and inner city people create more prosperity and more freedom. It was incredible. And Kanye gave this beautiful, inspiring talk on the media, which I saw the real version of it, and I saw the media version where they edited it to make it look like what he was saying didn't make any sense. And they went beyond that. They didn't think that was good enough. See, they're worried about high up elite superstars endorsing the current president, who is an enemy of the power structure, and they've got to make those superstars look like insane people. So they've been viciously attacking Kanye West, incredible racial slurs against him, which I won't repeat here, but just amazing, trying to discredit him completely, destroy him as an idiot traitor. As I said, they used racial slurs that start with N against him because he talks about the president in real ways, not partisan. He's not coming up there being against anybody. He's in favor of universal love, which is the most powerful healing tool that I can imagine. And he's daring to do that and not divide everybody by race. So they're in the U.S., they're, trying to completely destroy him, and he's not caring, which is inspiring for the rest of us, like, to tell the truth, drop the hatred. It's as useless as fear and totally destructive. Don't be against anybody because they're all victims, even the bad perpetrators. What they're doing needs to be stopped for the sake of their victims, but not by hatred. It's not necessary, and not by fear. So the central bank is trying to do their part in this week in the U.S., trying to crash the economy by raising interest rates over and over and over and over and over again. And they say, well, if they say anything about it, they say, well, the economy could overheat if we don't keep raising interest rates. And people say, oh, the economy might overheat. That must be real economic science. I could never understand it. And that's how you're supposed to think about it, right? You're supposed to be in awe of experts. It's just like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, saying, I'm the great and powerful Oz, and pulling on these levers and stuff. And then Toto grabs the curtain, right, and shows the wizard is just this little guy who's speaking into a microphone amplifier and everything. That's like the economic experts at the central bank. They're not talking economic wisdom. They're talking total nonsense. There's no such thing as the economy overheating. There is a real thing of devaluing the currency, inflation that, just goes out of control because they're issuing currency based on nothing. That's real. But that's not the fault of success and prosperity. That's the fault of creating money out of nothing. And guess who does that? The central banks. And to some degree, the local banks too. And it's not the fault of the local employees who work in the bank. They're mostly really nice people, and they're hired to give a nice face to a horrible criminal operation. But when the local banks are given the power to do what's called fractional reserve banking, and they have $10 so they can lend out 100, and everybody says, oh, that must be really advanced economics. No, that's how to steal things without people knowing it. So the central banks are doing their part right now in America and elsewhere, trying to work against anybody doing good. And the overheating thing is completely nonsense. Another big element this week that's actually a really good thing, this lady, Nikki Haley, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UN, terrible. The current president's done so many terrible appointments, which I don't get confused about that. His motivation is obviously 100% to help the country. He's sacrificing his own well-being to do what he thinks will help all of us. But this was another terrible pick. She's been a horrible influence, a warmonger, talking about the president of Syria as if he's this major criminal, using false flag missile attacks as a justification for that accusation, even though we know that the last one didn't happen. And the U.S. has, on a criminal basis under the current president, shot missiles into that sovereign country, which is completely unacceptable and illegal and baseless. And this lady, Nikki Haley, was pushing for that, the overthrow of Syria, aggression against Russia, aggression against North Korea, threatening North Korea when the current president was accomplishing great things with the peace talks. She was trying to undermine it along with Bolton and other people like that. Really good that she's going to be gone. Another good thing that happened this week is the candidate for president in Brazil, nationalist who wants Brazil first, which is what the current U.S. president wants every country to do. It's not like the bad model of nationalism where you want your country to beat up all the other countries. That's what the media wants you to think this is, but it's not that at all. It's that if every country really takes care of itself and doesn't give all of its wealth to a central bank and to criminal corporations and everything, but really makes things so that its own people can keep the fruit of their own labors, that's wonderful. And then they become more and more stable, self-sufficient, but they can cooperate with other countries doing the same thing. That's the understanding of the good aspect of nationalism. And there's a candidate in Brazil that was running on that. The communist people are the ones who want status quo and to keep the Brazilian people enslaved, stabbed this candidate and tried to kill him, and they almost killed him in the middle of this huge crowd. But he survived, and he just won out of 15 candidates the first round of their voting. So that's fantastic development. Very encouraging that, and he wants not only the country to take care of itself, but to get rid of the law that prohibits Brazilian people from defending themselves, like a Brazilian Second Amendment. The media is trying to promote the idea that the Second Amendment is terrible and that having the freedom to defend yourself and have firearms is what causes school shootings and everything. That's complete nonsense. Where firearms are the most heavily prohibited and regulated, the most violent crime of anywhere, that's where it is. And schools being zones where it's not even legal for anybody to have those weapons, that's where they all get shot. So with a little bit of intelligence, you start putting that together, and they want to give those rights back to the people in Brazil. The people in the UK really need it, but they've been disarmed, and now the violent crime rate in London is absolutely horrible. We've had some videos on that, Lost Arts Radio, about that recently. So hopefully Brazil will vote itself back the right for self-defense and protection. Another wonderful thing this week is that this evangelical pastor in Turkey got freed. His name is Andrew Brunson. He was arrested in 2016. The media says he was arrested for aiding terrorism. That's nonsense. He was arrested for the crime of what's called Christianization. Because in Turkey, which used to be a Christian country, it's now illegal to be anything but their official religion, which starts with an I. And that was his crime, to not be that religion and trying to spread his religion instead to the people who wanted it, not by force like the I religion is spread. And right in the scriptures of the I religion, it says you have to kill anybody that won't convert or at least be your slave. That's an issue. And that's the religion that's dominating Turkey right now. So this pastor was arrested for that. And the current president of the U.S. really helped him get free, which was great. And again, the mainstream media, Huffington Post and everybody is saying that he was arrested for helping terrorists. That's completely not true. They're just lying openly. Bunch of other stuff. I don't have time to finish everything, but I do want to mention to you that Tim Cook, the head of Apple, which is probably one of the most evil companies in the world now, having essentially merged with the Chinese Communist government and is heavily involved in censorship. He was on an interview with, I think, Vice Network, and he was saying, no, what we do, our customers want a curated platform. Obviously not censoring, it's curated, which means anything that we decide you shouldn't see is curated off of there. It was really amazing. And he's trying to help Google and other really nasty companies work with the Chinese Communist government to develop a worldwide censorship system to test in China first and then move into the U.S. and everywhere else. Good development in Norway. I have to talk at chipmunk speed now because we're almost done. In Norway, there was a doctor who was arrested and put in jail for refusing to kill unborn babies. I mean, do abortions, right? Scientific abortions. And the Supreme Court said you don't have to kill them. You can still be a doctor, and he got reinstated. Another really interesting thing that came out this week is that it had been talked about before too, but Health and Human Services, that one of the big, actually illegal agencies in the U.S. For the last 32 years was told to monitor and improve the safety of injecting things into people. I'm not going to say the V word. And they were finally sued, I think, by Robert Kennedy and people connected with him to show what they had done to monitor it. And they kind of never did it because it would have shown that the injections were killing people, especially children, and still are. And the media continues to spread panic about the kids who haven't been injected with anything. Also on the censorship front, Facebook just shut down 800 pages in one day. 800 Facebook pages got deleted from conservatives, Christians, nationalists, of the type that I was saying that are good. Gun rights proponents, self-defense proponents, controlled borders proponents, constitutionalists. Facebook just eliminated their pages in one day. They are really accelerating the censorship. So news sites and platforms are under development as quickly as they can be to take over from these censorship platforms. It's a big race for that. Look at real.video and also Truth, Trooth, trying to be a substitute for Facebook. There's a new decentralized web in development from the original creator of the internet, and not Al Gore, but the real one. And so the bottom line is that how many of us could break free from the hypnosis and become conscious, because that would spread. It's not what you physically do as much as what consciousness is behind it. You can work for some great cause, and if your consciousness is full of fear and anger and wanting to destroy the bad guys, it's not going to have the same effect as if you're like one of those really high-level martial arts persons who is calm, fearless, incredibly strong and fast, but they're not brainwashed. They know exactly what they're doing. So my suggestion is, in the last minute here, if you're interested in that, if you want to help the world, which is really in a contest right now that's right on the knife's edge which way it'll go, do the work on yourself, because that's how whatever you do becomes tremendously more powerful. And I suggest you start on your physical health. Get off of drug addiction, whatever kind it is. If you need a great doctor to help you, get one that understands that toxic chemicals are not medicine. It's not the same thing. Real medicine never hurts or kills you. Important safety tip, as Egon would have said on Ghostbusters. So get your health and energy back. The body's designed to stay in great shape as long as you're in it. Not the stupid thing that they call normal aging is not true. Learn about that, and then you'll be in a position to do the work on higher levels, not assuming a belief, but getting in touch with and knowing things firsthand. Become self-aware. That's the main thing that matters. And take every experience that comes to you as a lesson that's tailored to you as an opportunity, not something that just happened by bad luck. It's got meaning in it. Find the meaning, do the lesson. It's just my suggestion. I'm working on the same thing. And remember our Sunday show tomorrow night, and club meeting in half an hour for the people that really want to get into working on themselves in this way. If you want our support, I'm going to be there in person, interacting, speaking more freely than I can speak on this public platform. And I invite you personally if you want. It's not a spectator thing. So if you're not ready, it's probably not worth the time for you. But if you really want to start making vast changes in your life, see where consciousness goes, get your health back and all that, check it out at lostartsradio.com/club. Really like to see you there. And it's not one way, it's interactive. It's pretty amazing private platform. Otherwise, watch for the free videos that we're still posting on the major platforms as long as we're allowed to stay there, as well as on Real Video. I hope you have a great week this week, and I'm very grateful for you letting us spend some time with you. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good week.